Welcome to the Disruptor Journals podcast. I'm Cliff Namachina, your host, and I'm a tech fanatic, a sleep deprived startup enthusiast, and I hate the sound of my own voice. It's been months since the last episode, but I'm sure you have noticed that the podcast has been rebranded. I tried doing everything myself the first time, and some of the decisions were really bad considering I knew nothing about podcasts at the time, but fortunately, I have found the perfect team to help me with this podcast. They'll be handling all the branding, the graphic design, the social media channels. We are working on really exciting stuff, and I can't wait for you to be a part of it. Links will be available as soon as everything is ready. It was made clear to me that the name I had gone with the first time around, that is Disrupting Zimbabwe, of course, would limit the scope of the content of the podcast. And also, it would be unfair for me to speak on the business and startup climate in Zimbabwe, given I'm not currently residing in Zimbabwe. So, what's next for the podcast? We'll be focusing, but not limited to the African continent as a whole. Disrupting Zimbabwe will remain a part of the show, but with more specific content. There's really exciting stuff happening there as well. So I guess there isn't much to the rebrand. Of course, I know I promised that I would have invited guests for the next episode, which is this episode, but man can only apologize and promise to do better. We are aiming to release at least an episode every week, and I'm excited to continue sharing with you and discussing innovative ideas that are shaping the future of our communities. This episode was initially meant to be an announcement only, but I thought to myself, why not just share a very short 2-minute message? But first, this podcast is brought to you by Lunio, a global branding agency connecting brands and people through the values that they share. I've always thought myself a professional thinker. I don't discuss ideas because I've mastered any of them. If anything, I've felt more than most. The one thing I really get to talk about is the lessons I've learned that are really outside business, technology, or any of the other topics that I discuss or talk about on this podcast. I'll be bringing such ideas from time to time, and the one I want to talk about today is wishful thinking. As always, I'll try to paint a picture. One of my favorite philosophers, Arthur Schopenhauer, said, "We deceive and flatter no one by such delicate artifices as we do our own selves." Nothing destroys dreams more than wishful thinking, and it is very hard not to be caught up in wishful thinking. By definition, wishful thinking is a means of reaching pleasant conclusions, maintaining preferred beliefs, or rejecting unfavorable beliefs even when reality demands otherwise. We think wishfully by cherry picking evidence, bending the rules of rational thought, or creating substitutes for reality. Wishful thinking is usually an outgrowth of fear. People don't resort to wishful thinking because it works. They resort to wishful thinking because it allows them to avoid confronting their fear. Wishful thinking allows you to avoid discomfort, stress, change, anxiety, and pressure. People resort to wishful thinking and magical thinking when they are afraid of bad outcomes. For instance, they avoid the doctor out of fear and pray for good health instead. They refuse to open their credit card bills out of fear and they wish for wealth instead. They do not approach people they would like to date, attempt to mentally manifest their perfect mate by wishing for them and imagining them. They're fearful they won't be a success, so they resort to wishing for success instead of actually doing the work to become a success. Naturally, in the face of fear, it's easier to think about fantasy than to think about reality. So, how to avoid wishful thinking, one might wonder. Think about this. Visualize all of the steps you think you might have to take in order to get to your goal. Close your eyes and see what you would do first, what you would do second and third, and so forth and so on. See the specific steps needed to get to your goal rather than only the final destination. For instance, if you want to become a more confident public speaker, visualize yourself learning how to present your material, practicing ahead of time, waiting to go on stage, and then delivering the actual speech. Also, think about ways you can make what you want come true. Think about the specific action steps you need to take to make your goal a reality. What are the fears that are causing you to wish for success and happiness rather than actually pursuing it? Remember, fearless people don't wish for change, they create it. And on this podcast, we are all about fearless people. If you're listening to this on your phone, subscribe to the show so you don't miss the next episode. This podcast was brought to you by Lunio, and until next time, cheers.